And welcome back to the OHIO podcast, everybody. I'm your host, Buckeye Boggs. That man over there is the wild man, Chris Wilds, and you. And we're thankful that you decided to join us for this video where we're going to break down the newest news, Chris, coming out of ACC land. That is now that the ACC has a second lawsuit on their hands. This one from the other top dog in the conference, and that
Yeah,
being Clemson.
and I think
Thing,
this surprised him a little bit. I
it
don't know how
surprised
much,
me.
this is why I say that. If you look, when FSU was going to sue them, and everybody knew it, Clemson did a preemptive strike. They did a very smart thing. They filed a countersuit, and they did it quickly so that they could be arguing over venue and get through this season. Right now, that's what they're doing. That's why they haven't gone into a full trial yet. Is they're still arguing over the venue for the Florida State suit against the ACC. Clemson got in there first. Clemson's going to get this and fought in their own backyard.
Yeah, this is really interesting. Let's break it down a little bit for you. As always, guys, hit the like button, share, subscribe. It really does help the channel. And we understand that there are other channels out there on YouTube who are in the weeds much greater than we are. We're in Buckeye country, Big Ten country. This is not
And we're
necessarily
better
something
looking.
this is not necessarily something that we are following every single day, but we're going to respond to this nonetheless because it does affect the Big Ten and Ohio State moving forward. So, Clemson's lawsuit, according to Pete Thamel on ESPN, they filed in the Court of Common Pleas there in South Carolina, and it has to do with the ACC's grant of rights and
Mhm.
exit fees, calling the withdrawal penalty. This is some of the words they use, some of the
Yeah,
verbiage they use,
this is
Chris.
great.
Unconscionable and unenforceable. That's great.
Yes.
And then later on,
Don't forget exorbitant.
considering talking about Clemson's media rights after it left the league, as in hey, they're letting the ACC know we're leaving.
Yeah.
But after we leave, your verbiage is about the media rights is nonsensical reading, wrong and inconsistent with the plain language of that agreement. So Clemson is Clemson has done two things, in my opinion.
Mhm.
Number one, they've come to so Florida went up first. Florida led
Mhm.
off. And Florida, they hit a solid double in my opinion.
Oh
Like
yeah.
they're gonna score. They're on second base, no outs, right? And
Right.
Clemson just came up to plate next. And if ACC is the pitcher, they're looking down the lineup and they're like anybody else. And I think the rest of the ACC lineup is looking at what this is, and I think you're going to start to see this happen. Now,
North
remember,
Carolina's next. Make no mistake.
well, Virginia had the lawsuit with NCAA. Now,
Mhm.
so they've already got their lawyers' feet wet here a little bit too, and they're feeling good about how they beat the NCAA when it
Yes.
came to the NIL and recruiting violations, quote unquote, which weren't, but you see my point here. And then you're right. I think North Carolina and Duke might be coming up next here. I think Duke's following North Carolina wherever North Carolina wants to go, but that's neither here nor there. The point is this: by Clemson doing this, it strengthens Florida State's
Yes.
case.
It sure does because they're fighting the same battle.
Correct.
Now you've got the two key members of the conference saying, "Listen, this isn't going to fly. You can't hold us to this." And what they did basically, and you put out the legal verbiage for it. They just basically stood up on their chair, looked at the ACC, gave them the old DX crotch chop, and said, "We out." That's basically what they're telling you. They have made it clear their intentions. They're not hiding anything at this point. And you know what? Like you said, the other ACC schools are going to see that, and they're going to follow suit because nobody's going to be wanting to be part of a dying conference. Nobody wants to be Oregon State and Washington State.
Yeah.
They just don't.
The reasoning behind this, guys, that you're seeing the Florida States and Clemson and very soon others from the ACC fight this is because what is happening around the country financially. Florida State and Clemson look at themselves and they look at the longevity of their athletic departments and they
Hmm.
understand in order for us to continue to be um, competitive athletically, not just in football, but all of our athletics, we have to have a sustainable financial resource that is going to keep us on par with the schools that are in the Big
Hmm.
Ten and SEC. And it's kind of if we can't beat them, join them mentality a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. And
So,
if you look, it's not just that, Eric. I mean, the money. Let's talk
mhm.
about the money aspect of it for a second. You know, we had touched on it a little bit before we came on. The fact that you've got the CFP just signed this huge deal with ESPN, and you look at the discrepancies in what these teams are getting paid in the SEC and the Big Ten versus every other or conference in the country. Um, and I'll be honest, I was kind of trying to revert back and take a look, but the financial aspect of it, there was what a was it a $10 million a team discrepancy basically or something like that between the two?
Well, I know this much. If you are a Big Ten or SEC school, you're making about 40 million more than at Big 12 or
Yeah,
ACC school,
yeah,
and that's before postseason money.
right. But I mean the discrepancy, the postseason money has a discrepancy in it.
It does, and it adds up over
It's
time significantly.
okay. The gap is 7 million difference for the Big Ten and SEC teams versus the ACC teams that are in the playoff.
Yeah,
It's 21 million versus 7 million or versus 13 million. So it's
right.
actually 8 million. 8 million.
So yeah, like most things, follow the money here, right?
Yeah.
And we get that. But what we want to talk about, what I really want to talk about now that we've gotten through the introductory of this,
Mhm.
and you know what it is. The next steps, kind of predicting the next
Who's
steps
coming?
here.
Who's coming and
Well,
where are they going?
here's the thing. This is what I realized. I've been some of the videos I've watched, some of the people who I trust and have heard talk. There's really a huge gap between the top half and the bottom half of the ACC.
Oh, there is.
Major gap. You would see the same thing in the Big Ten. If the Big Ten
Absolutely.
started to split up, there's a top half and a bottom half. Same thing in SEC. The difference is the top half of the ACC schools are looked at as being able to add value
Yes.
to a conference. So you have your Florida State, your Clemson, your North Carolina. Those are the big three that first come to mind. You
Georgia
have
Tech
you because of the
is
Atlanta market.
kind of that mid tier. Yeah.
Yeah. Same with Virginia.
Hmm.
Um, Duke, like I said, tied at the hip at North Carolina. You have your bottom half teams, your Boston colleges, Syracuse,
Which Boston College is a great
Pitt,
television market as well, but they're just not a
Louisville,
great program.
Virginia Tech. I like all five of those schools, by the way.
Yeah,
But my
absolutely.
point being is they do not add value to a conference. So here's what the ACC did and why there's kind of a split. And the other thing that we failed to mention about this that the Clemson was arguing, the point they were arguing, Chris, was that when the ACC did their lawsuit against Florida State, Clemson said, "Hey, you didn't give us any voice whether you were going to countersue or not. And as
Correct.
a member of the ACC, you have to give us a voice to say either we agree or do not agree on that, and you didn't." So um, that's a major part of their argument to this. And it's to me, I think it underlines everything about the leadership of that conference and their failure to get everybody on the same page.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, taking that into account, the ACC, back when they voted to add Cal, Stanford, and SMU, the vote was split 7-7. Did you know that?
Mhm.
which is incredibly interesting that half of them said yes, and the other half said no. We
I
don't
bet you
want
can.
to.
I bet you can tell which seven said which.
Yeah, I guarantee. I promise you. But the reason they did that was they were taking the Big 12 model and
Hmm.
saying, in order to survive, we have to have enough left to still have a conference to where maybe we can poach a few more of the group of five schools and still call ourselves a Power Five, now Power Four, right?
Yeah,
So, could there be an offer to Washington State and Oregon State in the future? Could there
sure.
be an offer to a Tulane? Could there be an offer to maybe South Florida, a USF?
You're going to see the Sun Belt schools, um, some of the Mountain West. You may even see some of the MAC schools get into the mix where they're going to offer them because if what I believe to be true is happens, if we see, and my thought is it's going to be 24 teams in each of the big conferences, but you could see them go to 30. You could, but I'm thinking 24 teams in each conference. They're going to have, if they want to stay in that the mix, they're going to have 20, 24 teams in their conference,
Yeah.
which means they're going to have to take a watered down, you know,
But they're never gonna get
they're
the
never going to get to the
automatic
correct.
automatic slots like the Big Ten and SEC have done, but they're still trying to survive enough to where they're basically saying we're on par with the Big 12. That's kind of what's happening here.
Yeah,
Is the ACC is looking at this and saying we're going to fight tooth and nail just for the financial reasons of this and the PR hit that we don't want to have happen. So they're going to fight tooth and nail Florida State and Clemson and North Carolina and Virginia and Georgia Tech and Duke,
well, because if you look at it, the top half of the ACC is all that's keeping the
Miami. That's the
ACC
other one.
in. That's all that's keeping the ACC in business.
Yeah.
It
Those are the
really is,
seven
and as those guys disappear, the ACC disappears.
those are the seven schools that are going to try to jump ship.
Mhm.
And where they go and who they go to, what happens, what happens to NC State, what happens to, does the Big 12 start to poach some of them?
Sure,
Does the
if
Big 12
the
come in and
opportunity's
say,
there.
hey, NC State, Wolfpack, Pitt, we've got West Virginia already, Pitt, West Virginia, Louisville, you guys make perfect sense. NC State, that makes sense as well. Come on over.
I would still love for the Big Ten to poach West Virginia.
It's not going to happen. So this is what's going to come down the pike. I don't see the Big 12 falling apart. I see the
No,
Big 12 kind of saying we want to be the next big dog after the
yeah,
SEC and the Big 10.
mhm.
You know, does the ACC survive or do they fall into kind of the somewhere between the Big 12 and a group of 5 conference possibly. I
Well,
don't know.
as you
That's
said,
what's
maybe the Big East gets revived.
Yeah, I still feel like that the Big East would be like come back home and we'll have Connecticut, who's already in the Big East, can have some football schools to
Mhm.
play. I could see them doing a small conference, but the Big East is so basketball
They're
centric
basketball. Yeah.
that it's kind of hard for some people to see that. But I heard rumblings of that about a year ago that the
Mhm.
Big East they were talking about what if the ACC falls apart? Could we be in place to gobble up some of these schools? That's if the ACC falls apart and is no longer exist. If they go the way of the Pac-12, then maybe the Big East becomes a player. But it sounds like to me that the ACC is trying to put themselves in place to where they go the way of the Big 12 and not the way of the Pac-12.
And that's the best model for survival. It really is. But then again, like I say, at what point do we stop? At what point does it stop as far as, how credible can we make these guys when they've got MAC schools in their conference at that point?
Yeah.
And
Well,
that's not to blast the
no,
MAC schools. The
it's not.
MAC schools are a great mid-major. It's a great mid-major conference. I love to watch some MAC football, but at the same time, you know, I just don't know how feasible it is. Now, the other thing that we haven't really taken into account, Eric, is we've seen some schools here recently, going back. Obviously James Madison recently made the move up from uh, the one double A,
Hmm.
um, and,
Uh,
and Appalachian
um,
State had made that move a while back. So, I mean, are
I'm
we going
trying
to
to
see
think of
the
the school
exact
that's coming. I know Delaware's coming in a couple. Is it Kennesaw State or what is it?
Kennesaw State?
Uh, they're coming in next year, and I think Delaware's coming in the year after that and joining Conference USA. Um,
Which is what
so
that's going to happen for these Group of Five conferences
yeah,
now. They're going to have to get these one double A schools that want to promote. And by God, it worked pretty well for James Madison.
yeah, yeah. This is another video, and I probably shouldn't mention it here at the end of this one because this is more on what we expect. But let's before I throw that nugget out there, timetable for this. There was a lot of talk about Florida State could make it as fast as this summer. It's not going to happen.
That's not going to happen. The legal system moves very slowly, Eric,
Yeah,
especially.
this is a year or two away from Florida State and Clemson, and when that happens, I believe the floodgates open.
Yeah.
And when the floodgates open, I do believe that you will see North Carolina, you will see Duke, you will see Georgia Tech,
Hmm.
Miami, Florida State, Clemson. Those six um, are probably in Virginia, maybe seven. Um, they're gonna leave, and they're gonna find homes in the Big Ten or SEC. Now, how those get split up?
And the
Um,
funny thing about seven is that there's going to have to be an eighth, Mr. Kennedy.
yeah, yeah. There's talk, but the way they did this contract, I think Notre Dame's good for 6 years. After that,
It- yeah.
we'll see. But yeah, I would definitely think that if you're looking at this from the Big Ten's perspective, you're looking at Florida State number one. I think you look at Miami number two
Hmm.
and getting yourself there. I think if they would come, I think you would take North Carolina, which means you'd probably also have to take Duke. A lot of people think Georgia Tech to the Big Ten, which makes sense because I just don't see Georgia wanting Georgia Tech in there.
Right.
I know the SEC is definitely going to want North Carolina. They're going to go after North Carolina. Um,
Well, they need
everybody's
that
talking about,
basketball credibility.
yeah, and which means then Duke too. But that seems, I don't know. I don't think they would want Duke, but we'll see. Clemson's interesting to me. Clemson is interesting to me. They already
I
have
think
South Carolina.
Clemson wants the SEC. I honestly feel like they're a better fit to the Big Ten, though.
I do too. I actually think Clemson's a better fit in the Big Ten than Florida State is.
Mhm.
But with what everything went on with Florida State and the ESPN and the College Football Committee, Florida State I think has got their heart set on the Big Ten.
Yeah.
However, they do not have AAU status, which is
You
that
know
still
what,
a
though?
big
That's
deal or
out. That's
not?
out the window at this point, Eric.
It
It,
seems like it is, but is it?
it is.
I don't know. We'll see.
It is.
A lot of interesting things. Let us know in the comments below. Who do you think ends up where? I'd like to get what you think and why. Let me know why. Don't just say here's where, this is a total guess. Put some thought behind it. Who goes where and why? Who gets left behind? Who do you think would get poached by the Big 12? Would you like to see the Big East come back and grab some of those old Big East schools like Syracuse, Pitt, Louisville, Virginia
Virginia
Tech?
Tech. Yeah.
Yeah, bring those all back to the Big East and try to put together a 7, 8 team conference again. Gosh, I think Big Ten could probably let go of Rutgers, maybe. I mean, here's Rutgers if you want Big East. Here you go.
Well, I'll tell you
I'm
what. That's
joking.
where they had the most success.
It is where they had the most success. You're absolutely right. But it's not where they're going to get the most money, as you and I both
No.
know. Let us know in the comments. Please like, share, subscribe. We really do appreciate that. Till next time, Chris OH.
I hope.
Go Bucks.